the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
The wheel of fortune says around, around she goes, and where she stops nobody knows.
Just a minute. I thought you said that you could read my mind.
Well, George, how can I read your mind if you keep on asking me all those silly questions?
I'm asking.
But I remember that it was mostly noise, real loud noise, and you could hear the music way in the background. We thought it was wonderful because it had no wires. This was incredible. Telephone has wires, but the radio didn't.
It wasn't like turning on something and being able to, you were just so thankful to hear anything because it was so strange. It was coming from the outer space, you might say. And who would have ever thought that anybody could ever do that? And it wasn't so much of what you heard because it wasn't continuous enough. You'd just about pick up a station and you'd lose it. You'd go to something else.
But first, we'd like to ask you to let us know if this broadcast is reaching you. Please drop us a card, address station KDKA.
From the first faint crackle that was heard, traveling mysteriously through the air from some distant place, people were hooked. Never before, and possibly never since, has an invention so awed the nation and captured the imagination and the hearts of America. Radio shaped the nation's sense of who we were. It gave us heroes and villains. For the first time, families joined together to laugh, to cry, but most of all, to imagine.
Chandu, the magician.
Take Armstrong, the all-American boy.
Wave the flag for Hudson High, boys. Show them how we stand.
And as children used to, when I was about 14, 15 years old, we used to go down to the hardware store. He was the only man who could afford one because it was real expensive in them days. And we used to go down there and congregate there and watch them play checker and listen to the radio down there.
We used to dim the lights or turn them off, and you could really concentrate in a great way by doing that, you know. And like I say, that would take my imagination a lot better than television ever does, because when you're looking at television, you see everything. It's hard to concentrate.
Many people heard their first sounds of radio through a crystal set, a crude model of today's radio that was capable of picking up a signal from miles away. Early programming was mostly music, and of course, the static came through loud and clear.
We used to take an oats box and wrap it with wire and a crystal and a pin, a common pin, and make a radio. Now that sounds funny, but it's the truth. It works.
We would get permission to go to the superintendent's office, and we'd take the earphones apart so two people could listen in. And it was an odd contraption that the boys had put together in one of the classes at school. And it was back in 1922.
My dad bought an Army Signal Corps crystal detector set about 1919, right after the First World War. And about that time, Lee DeForest had perfected the vacuum tube, so my dad, being an experimenter, hooked up a vacuum tube to this crystal detector, and I was fortunate enough to hear KDKA broadcast the Harding-Cox election returns, which I think was one of the very first programs on the air.
In the early 1920s, tuning in was simpler with the invention of loudspeakers and advanced receiving sets. But who could have guessed then just how much of an effect this magic box would have on American life? From the very beginning, radio seemed destined to become a major part of our lives.
But with radio, your imagination, I'd probably picture it differently from my neighbor or my friend or my wife, but boy, your imagination, there's no width to it, no length. It's the whole world.
By the mid-20s, advertisers had discovered the enormous possibilities of this new medium. And before the end of the decade, it was clear radio was here to stay.
Somebody pounded my pine, Carolina pine. Well, you know there's no such place as North Carolina. That's Upper South Carolina. Yeah, pay attention now, boy. Claghorn's name, Senator Claghorn, that is. Start laughing. I'm from the South. If you're listening, you should be laughing. Yeah.
The golden days of radio brought entertainment right into our living rooms. And it was here that comedy found a home. Radio was the perfect way for a comedian to express a unique style. The airwaves were filled with many of vaudeville's greatest talent, and new stars emerged with each new program. One of radio's most popular and longest-running programs was The Amos and Andy Show, a comedy that would become literally the talk of the town.
Every night you could hear Amos and Andy from every window because nobody had air conditioning. Everybody had their windows up. You could hear the whole show while you were walking home from work.
This car ain't no good, Andy. Look at there. That kingfisher's done stuck you again. Look at that. You ain't even got no windshield. All you got is the frame there.
I thought that glass was awful clean.
Freeman Gosden as Amos and Charles Correll as Andy wrote their own scripts and played most of the parts. Just about everything came to a standstill when Kingfish, Andy and the gang, and their Fresh Air Taxi Company came on the air. Movie theaters scheduled their films to stop at 7 o'clock when the program began. Even department stores piped in the show to keep customers happy. Following their trials and tribulations would become a national pastime.
Wait a minute, Andy. You could be married by tomorrow.
Yeah, I could be wait a minute here. How is I going to meet a gal that quick?
Oh, just stand on the corner and keep whistling. It's like when you go up to the North Woods hunting for moose, and you give up with the moose call. You can't be fussy. You got to take the first moose that comes along.
Yeah, Kingfish, but you got to be a little more particular about a wife. After all, if you don't like a moose, you can shoot it.
Ed Wynn made the transition from vaudeville to radio, first in The Perfect Fool, and later as Texaco's fire chief, joined by his straight man, Graham McNamee. A man who made ad-libbing an art form was Groucho Marx. His You Bet Your Life program hit the top 20 during the 1940s as his popularity soared. Perhaps no single comedian was responsible for launching more successful careers than Eddie Cantor. In the 30s, his Chasing Sanborn Hour and The Eddie Cantor Show were blockbuster hits. Aside from showcasing his own talents, Cantor is credited with discovering Dinah Shore and the Mad Russian Burt Gordon. And it was Cantor who introduced audiences to this talented team.
Listen to this, George. This column says that Betty Grable has put on a lot of weight, but it doesn't say where.
Doesn't say where?
No, it just says that in her new picture, she has a very fat part.
That means she has a big role.
Around the middle, huh?
George Burns and Gracie Allen began their relationship with radio audiences in the early 30s. It was a relationship that would last for 18 years. Less than a year after appearing on The Eddie Cantor Show, they had their own program. The Burns and Allen Show perfectly matched George's dry wit with Gracie's scatterbrained logic.
But part of the interest, I guess, was that a man and a woman could carry on a half-hour program and be of interest just by trading jokes and sidelines. And of course it was usually his put down of Gracie and her sharp remarks back that I think were the interest.
We're more more than just Bill's friends. We're like his family. Well, I think of you as his father. Now, I think of myself as his kid sister.
Maybe Bill doesn't want to get married. Maybe he's having too much fun.
Well, it's time he got married and stopped having fun.
That'll do it.
What was that?
Radio showcased other great comedy teams, like the unforgettable Abbott and Costello. Many of their innovative slapstick routines would become classics.
Who is on first?
Well, what are you asking me for?
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. Who is on first?
I'm asking you who's on first.
That's the man's name.
Well, go ahead and tell me.
That's the man's name.
That's whose name?
Yes.
Well, go ahead and tell me.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who?
The fella playing first.
Look, who is on
Have
first?
you got a first baseman?
Yes.
Who's trained there?
Yes.
All I'm trying to find out is what's the guy's name on first base?
No, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. Don't mix them up. What is on second?
Who's on second?
No, who is on first?
I don't know.
He's on third now. We're not talking about him.
How did I get on third base?
You just mentioned his name.
If I mentioned the third baseman's name, who did I say is playing third?
No, who's playing first?
Never mind first. I don't know. What's the guy's name on third base?
What's on second?
Who's on second?
Who's on first?
I don't know.
Third base.
Have you got a third baseman?
Certainly.
Then who's playing third?
Who is playing first?
What's playing first?
No, what's on second?
I don't know.
He's
Third
the
base.
Third base.
The undisputed master of the one-line gag was Red Skelton. His long list of characters included Junior, Clem Cadiddlehopper, and Deadeye, the fastest gun in the West. Listening to the unmistakable Jimmy Durante recreate the English language provided some of radio's funniest moments. When Durante teamed with comedian Gary Moore on the Camel Comedy Caravan, the results were hilarious. Why, Daddy, was a common question asked by radio's most popular 7-year-old, Baby Snooks, as played by the incomparable Fanny Bryce. Listeners adored the troublemaking innocence of radio's bad little girl. Snooks tested the patience of her daddy, Hanley Stafford, throughout the 1930s and 40s.
Well, what do you have against Harvey anyway?
Well, for one thing, he hurt my little foot something terrible.
Oh, when was this?
Yesterday, when I kicked him in the teeth.
And why did you kick him in the teeth?
'Cause he broke my doll.
Oh, I see. And how did Harvey break your doll?
I hit him over the head with it.
Another of radio's lovable brats was Charlie McCarthy, Edgar Bergen's wisecracking dummy. Bergen achieved enormous popularity as a ventriloquist on radio, despite that unlikely combination. Audiences were able to concentrate on his skilled voices that perfectly characterized Charlie and the hayseed Mortimer Snurd.
Well, you know, Halloween's coming, so we go around to the storekeepers, and for 25 cents, we sell them protection.
You sell them protection?
Yeah. We put a sticker on their window that says, no soap.
No soap.
You know, Bergen, there's a lot of nasty kids around here that soap up windows on Halloween.
Yeah. Suppose they don't pay.
Oh, boy. They always snare them up good.
Yeah.
Hello, oh, isn't that disgusting?
Mortimer, you seem more stupid than ever today. Why is that?
Well, today I'm observing Brainless Sunday.
And his facility with those and his voices really soaked into you at that time. On radio, you just took them as individuals. You just kind of listened and you made up your mind what you saw. And everybody that I know of almost thought of Mortimer and Charlie McCarthy as people.
It isn't Hildegard, kiddies.
Social satire was perfected by Fred Allen, the classic American humorist. Allen's unique, sophisticated wit often centered around current events and taking shots at his network bosses. And audiences loved the characters who inhabited Allen's Alley. Some of Allen's greatest moments came when the script he had worked tirelessly on was thrown aside as he improvised the rest of the routine.
Thank you, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Kenny, I hope you are celebrating the fleet's return.
Oh, yes, Fred. Well, New York has gone all out to welcome the Navy.
Oh, I know. Last night, they had 80 men rocking the Astor Hotel to make the sailors feel at home who were sleeping there. And in that picture at Music Hall, you know, Weekend at the Waldorf, they took out Walter Pigeon and put in a seagull just for the Navy. Wish some of the Navy had come in to laugh at these jokes, you know.
I always think about Fred Allen and how he was really ahead of his time in his humor. If he were here now, he would be having a heyday with our politicians.
What may have been radio's longest-running fight was the friendly feud between Fred Allen and his on-air rival, Jack Benny.
Now, wait till I get my violin. Hand it to me, will you, Mary?
All right, but I'll hate myself in the morning.
Never mind, give it to me.
What began as a jibe at Benny's violin playing erupted into a barrage of insults that lasted for over 12 years. And audiences loved it.
Jack, I really dropped in tonight.
Wait a minute, Fred, wait a minute. Let me look at you.
Yeah?
Gee, you're looking swell.
Yeah?
I've never seen you have such rosy-colored bags under your eyes.
Look, Jack, I dropped in
And
tonight.
that pained expression on your face. You look like a hen trying to lay a basketball. I'm getting mine in first.
Well, all right, Jack. Ladies and gentlemen, please tune in your radios an hour from now when this nature boy of the gay 90s is a guest on my program without his writers.
Jack Benny, the man people love to hate, built a huge following of listeners who love to hear of his money troubles and his fears of aging. His miserliness and vanity act would keep him on top for decades. Regulars on the Jack Benny Show included Mary Livingston and the valet and chauffeur, Rochester.
He was a backup or a stand-up man for Jack Benny and was always sort of leading into and was quite a character, and you waited for him to come onto the program. If you listened to him regularly, as most of us probably did, you'd hear Jack Benny and then you'd hear his other people and Phil Harris, and then you could hardly wait though until you'd hear what Rochester was going to do that week, because he always had just a little bit different twist.
Known as the radio philosopher, Will Rogers shared with audiences his own special brand of political wisdom. His observations got at the heart of the humor and satire that could be found in everyday American life.
And as I recall, when his program was over, and it was sort of a commentary on the life of the nation, his alarm clock would go off, and that would be his signal for saying goodbye.
We're up here with a movie company, and the legislature, as I say, they're here, and people can't hardly tell which is which. We're up here making a comedy to try and put over on the people, and they're up here working on one to try and put on the same people. Oh, yeah, wait, I ain't through. I got a lot to do. Goodbye. Good night.
Comedies with a regular cast of characters that appeared each week became popular during the golden age of radio. Shows like The Goldbergs, Lum and Abner, Vic and Sade, and Easy Aces. Listeners anxiously awaited the start of each new program to see just what trouble their favorite characters would get into next. Many programs had a unique style or trademark that was repeated in every episode. Take what always seemed to happen each week at 79 Wistful Vista, the home of Fibber McGee and Molly.
Hey, where's Lena with that hot water bottle? Don't she know where we keep it?
Do you?
No, I don't. Oh, yes, I do, too. It's right here in the hall closet.
No, McGee, that's one of the things I have to clean out when
The sound effects man went to town. He supposedly you open the door and everything falls out, making all this clatter.
And make no mistake about it, you could see everything that fell out of that closet.
We lived for supper to end so that we could begin to hear the shows that were coming on. And for instance, I think it was Thursday night was the Bing Crosby show, and Ken Carpenter was the announcer, and Bob Burns, the big country boy, played the bazooka, which was made of gas pipe. And you look forward to these things. And Joe Penner might have been a guest on the Bing Crosby show. Then, as Bing would say, if you didn't like this show, there's always hope ahead. And he was right, because Bob Hope came on after Bing Crosby. And it was one after the other. Great entertainment.
Bob Hope started on radio in 1934. His long-running Pepsodent show would make him one of the best-loved comedians of all time. And his admirable record of performing for the troops during wartime is unmatched.
A person that lifted our spirits during the war was Bob Hope and his program. And of course he went on into television, but during the war I can remember being very glad that Bob Hope was there to keep our spirits up.
The humor and sense of friendship that came through our radio sets helped ease the pain of the Depression and the anxiety of the war. The comedians helped us stop for a moment and forget our troubles. They made us laugh at our world, but more importantly, they made us laugh at ourselves.
You knew, week in and week out on these various shows, you knew what was going to happen. You knew the format, and yet they were funny and they were good. And if you listen to the programs repeated, the old programs broadcast today, people still enjoy them, and you hear them over and over, and they were good. They were solid. It was good humor, good entertainment, good music, and I kind of think we're hard put to duplicate some of that today.
That's nothing. Even the cow got mad at me when I tried to milk her this morning.
Well, no wonder. Milking a cow is a slow, gentle process. Squirt, squirt, squirt.
Squirt, squirt, squirt?
Yes, you don't throw your arms around the whole cow and try to squeeze it out all at once.
I'd hate to be drowning and have someone throw me a line like that.
Throughout those golden days of yesteryear, radio had us listening and had us laughing. The airwaves were filled with the greatest collection of comedians ever assembled. And then, suddenly, the nation's laughter turned to disbelief.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Stay tuned to WOR for...
They report to us that the attacking planes number between 50 and 100, that the air raid is still on, and that the anti-aircraft fire can be heard in a steady drone as the...
And hostilities of this kind would naturally mean that the President would ask Congress for a declaration of war.
Radio etched that infamous day forever in our memories. The attack on Pearl Harbor catapulted news reporting into the spotlight. Suddenly, radio had a new role. It was there to tell the story.
And just now comes the word from the President's office that a second air attack has been reported on Army and Navy bases in Manila.
He is in constant touch with happenings on all fronts. For the latest news, keep tuned to your station. This is the National Broadcasting Company, RCA Building Radio City.
I remember signing off at WKRC, which was then the Time Star station, and they had studios in the Alms Hotel. And I had come back home, and I got a call. No sooner got in from the station manager, and something was happening that was pretty serious. I was told to go back, open up the station, get on the air, and be prepared for whatever the news was going to bring.
Millions of families gathered around their radio sets that afternoon to hear the first reports of the Japanese attack.
I remember that happened on a Sunday, and my husband and I had gone to church, but we had the radio on all afternoon after that, waiting for news from Hawaii as to how severe the damage was. and what it was going to do to the American people.
Honolulu calls unidentified planes shot down. And this latest report now from KGMB is all that we have to the moment. We will continue to receive reports from there, also from Washington, on the developments in our relations with Japan, the relations which will tell very shortly the story of what is to happen in the months that are to come.
From Washington, the recruiting office of the United States Navy announces that all recruiting centers will be open at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
The scenes of devastation described by radio newsmen stunned the American people. The shock of World War II suddenly became a reality.
When I think of times like that, I think radio really places us where we were and who we were with at a special time. I can distinctly remember going to visit some friends and going into their house, and the President Roosevelt was on the radio just at that time making that announcement. Never forget that.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
It's been estimated that 60 million Americans heard that historic speech.
And I think most of us that heard him make the announcement will never forget where we were at that moment in time.
And I do remember that our high school was called to an assembly to hear the news that we had joined the war in World War II after Pearl Harbor. Well, it was impressive, and it was very sobering for high school kids to hear that, because we knew that some of our young men would be the next to be drafted.
Millions of American boys are over there taking part in this operation. Your neighbor's boy, maybe your own boy, your husband, is over there. And so we know how vitally interested all of America is. And the news that Allied troops are piling onto the shore of France virtually with no opposition, and that the skies are practically clear of German planes.
Suddenly, war updates began to arrive at an unheard of pace, and it seemed as if listeners couldn't get enough information. Literally hundreds of correspondents kept on top of the fast-changing world events. Floyd Gibbons pioneered the first on-the-spot reports, and Lowell Thomas concentrated on broadcasting the story of the human side of war.
These people all had their editorial opinions, and they didn't hesitate to express them on radio in that period, and people wanted that. That was what was looked for.
All of these were very, very big radio announcements, and that was the only thing that you had more or less in an instantaneous report. You got the newspaper stories 24 hours later or whatever, but the airways would break for a lot of reports. People were glued to their radios for announcements, particularly if you had anyone involved.
CBS's correspondent Edward R. Murrow achieved distinction with his penetrating and thought-provoking commentary on the war. His style would set a new standard for news reporting in the future.
This is Trafalgar Square. The noise that you hear at the moment is the sound of the air raid siren. I'm standing here just on the steps of St. Martin's in the Fields. A searchlight just burst into action off in the distance. One single beam sweeping the sky above me now. People are walking along quite quietly.
He spoke well, he had very definite ideas, but he interviewed well. He didn't project his ideas into the minds of the other people. He interviewed, but he also was able to tell you very clearly what was going on and what he felt would be the outcome. And he was very highly regarded.
Well, Edward R. Murrow probably started a style of radio journalism that has continued to this day because he changed the pattern. Up till that time, Lowell Thomas was the one who more or less dramatized the news, and Murrow was a reporter, and there's a little difference between the two.
But at the very moment at which I speak, the ships, the great ships of the United States Navy, which have been standing off Tokyo and other ports of Japan for the past 48 hours, are moving in.
The Dean of Radio News Commentators, H.V. Kaltenborn, carved out his own unique authoritative style during the war years. Using a clipped accent, his knowledgeable and intuitive reporting made him a highly respected newsman. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea, was the well-known opening line of radio columnist Walter Winchell. His sharp analysis of the news influenced public and political opinion.
I think that we were simpler at that point in time, and I think that people looked to someone of the stature of a Kaltenborn or a Fulton Lewis Jr. or a Winchell to know more than they did about the news of the world, the events of the world, and to help formulate how they felt or thought about issues. And these men told you in no uncertain terms.
Tonight, the criminal headquarters of the world are watching the map of Europe shrink to the size of a hangman's noose. They know that Patton, Bradley, and Zukov are doing more than revealing the weakness of the German army. They are uncovering the evidence of the greatest crime in history. A Japanese prison is a summer resort compared to a Gestapo concentration camp. But until these crimes are punished, there will be no world peace.
The newsmen offered us their impressions in a way that had never been done before. The stories they told gave us both the good news and the bad, as radio brought news from the war front directly to the home front.
It was a sad time. I can remember thinking back at that time, and it seemed like the skies were always gray because it was really a very sad time for our country.
And the thing that I think most about is the fact how we in this country at that time came together, and everybody pulled together, everybody tightened up. You'd give up whatever you had to give up to win the war and to not let this situation go the wrong way.
And then came a very special report. The war was over.
Not long after midnight, Domei, the official Japanese news agency, told the world that Japan had surrendered. When radio's instantaneous transmission carried that news to the 48 states, the celebrations began.
On Times Square in New York City, Ben Grauer reporting as I literally stand tiptoe, sticking my head outside the silver-gray turret top of the NBC mobile unit and look uptown over a foaming, seething, writhing mass of faces. Are these people happy? That's the only word to express it. Are you happy? And all I need to do is turn my NBC microphone down over the...
One voice stood out among the rest during the war years that would last for many years to come.
You, the people of this country, are receiving news through your radios and your newspapers at every hour of the day. You are, I believe, the most enlightened and the best informed people in all the world at this moment.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the first president to recognize the immense potential of radio. Through his innovative fireside chats, Americans got to know their president firsthand, and it was as easy as turning on the dial.
My countrymen and my friends, tonight my single duty is to speak to the whole of America.
So we enjoyed his fireside chats. That was something that we could relate to what the president was thinking. And it was a whole new idea of having some really contact with the executive.
It was very informal. I mean, they had their dog Fowler, and he talked about his family and different things. And he tried to let his hair down, you know, and come across to the people. Of course, they loved him. He was in 4 terms, you know.
Roosevelt wisely used this new medium to help win political support for his programs, his ideas, and for himself.
Everybody came in because that was something that was educational, and we all sat around listening. Everybody would come in.
I never forget that I live in a house owned by all the American people, and that I have been given that trust. And constantly I seek to look beyond the doors of the White House, into the hopes and fears of men and women in their homes.
One of the things that I was assigned to do at that period of time when he was giving these fireside chats was to stand by in the studio in case something happened to the network line and the fireside chat went dead. I was to jump in and you know, explain to the listeners that one moment, please. And then, if need be, there were 2 big 16-inch turntables, and we had transcribed music or whatever was needed to fill in. And so, when you have to listen attentively, you do, and he certainly was the radio president. He had a certain ability to magnetize and to make people feel at ease, and this is the father figure, and you know, have no concerns, I am here. And he was skilled. He was a skilled politician.
Just enough to keep it from... It bursts into flames. Get it started, get it started. It's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh, my, get out of the way, please. It's burning and bursting into flames and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between it. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's
From coast to coast we all can boast and sing a toast to one who's made a name for being game.
Awaiting Lindbergh. Lindbergh is coming down the gangplank, walking slowly, his hat in his hand, quietly, dignified. A darn nice boy.
Lucky Lindy up in the skies, fair or windy, he's flying high.
I think that what radio brought out was that we could hear things right when it happened. Like when Lindbergh flew across, what a wonderful thing it was. But everybody heard about it. The news came to us. I think the news was great. The newspaper, you know, you'd have to wait for that. But the radio brought it right after it happened. And I think that meant a lot to people.
Last of the ninth. The pitch swung on. There's a drive hit out toward the right field corner. He can't get it. It's off the wall for a base hit. Here comes the tying run, and here comes the winning run.
Some of the first reports ever broadcast on radio were sports events. The talent of those early sportscasters, mixed with a little imagination, brought home the thrilling sights and sounds of the game.
And one of the evidences of that was that in early baseball radio announcing, the announcers were not at the ball game. They were at a script somewhere where it was coming off of the wire, and they were making all these noises and things that would go on in an ordinary ballpark, such as a slap of the bat. They were doing all of that, and they were, talk about imagination, they were terrific. They were just beyond belief how they could dramatize something they weren't even seeing. And you just sat there, and he brought you right into that ballpark. He had your home plate.
Here comes the pitch, and it's ball one. Here comes the next pitch, a strike call. That is 1-1. And this crowd just straining forward at every pitch.
Swung on the drive back into right field. A long one. The ball game is over.
The men would sit on the swing and on their porch and have the windows open and the radio turned up loud enough so that you could follow the baseball game. This was in Cleveland, the Cleveland Indians. You could follow the baseball game all the way to the store and back. And of course it was on in the store too, so you didn't have to miss a play.
And I can remember in the summertime sitting with her and listening to baseball games, and she always had the family mending, and I usually had some embroidery work or something that we did while the baseball games were on.
I was working in a corner drugstore, and I was sitting behind the counter this one day cleaning this box paper, and I dozed off. And my boss came by and he says, Daniel, would you like to hear the World Series? I thought, oh my goodness, this is a store where you work here, you don't listen to radios. So I said, oh, I'd love to. He said, well, you go up the street to the furniture store, to Julius, and tell him I sent you up for a radio. So I run up Central Avenue, boy, I'm going to hear the World Series. I go in the furniture store and I said, the boss sent me up for a radio. He said, oh yes, here it is. And it was one of these big console models. And they took a furniture strap and they put it on my back, and I had to backpack it all the way up Central Avenue to the store, into the prescription room, and I was the only one allowed to listen to this. I had to keep it turned down low so it didn't interfere with anybody. Well, this went on for the whole game. The game ended, and he said, how was it? I said, oh, it's a wonderful game. He said, now take the radio back. I said, well, my goodness, this is only the first game. There could be as many as 7 games. He said, well, you take the radio back, and tomorrow you go back up and get it. Well, going up with that radio on my back again, I thought, my God, 7 games, that could be 14 trips. So I took it back. The next day I'm sitting behind there cleaning the stationery, and he comes walking by and he says, Daniel, do you want to listen to the game today? I says, no, sir. I think I better just finish this stationery job. So that was that.
Ladies and gentlemen, main event, 10 rounds for the heavyweight championship of the world.
Well, a gentleman on our street lived right across the street, Mr. Holt, bought a huge console set, and he put it out on his front porch, and everyone on the street, we were all out there tramping down his grass and his bushes and listening to the Dempsey-Tunney fight.
Throughout the early years of radio, if there was a big game or a news flash to report, radio was there. Never before had so much information been gathered and distributed so effectively to so many people at once. As we gathered in front of our radios, events that happened around the globe didn't seem so far away.
He was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft. Then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, blowing reveille. He's a boogie bugle boy of Company B.
Music set the tone of the times and fit the radio format perfectly. It was here that many of our biggest stars were heard for the first time. Music was broadcast at all hours of the day and night, and for every taste imaginable. Each week, women would swoon over their radios to the sounds of Rudy Valley on the Fleshman Yeast Hour, one of the first in a long line of musical variety programs.
It was called the Vagabond, I think. It was very nice. Had a beautiful voice. And every week we used to listen to him.
There's no time like a diamond, no one like you. Hi-ho, everybody. This is Rudy Valley welcoming you to another...
The Vagabond Lover and his Connecticut Yankees started a trend in the early 30s that set the stage for stars like Bing Crosby, who with his Kraft Music Hall program would make the variety show a mainstay in popular entertainment.
July
He used to gather on Monday night at the sorority house to listen to Bing. Before we had our meeting, we'd be sure to hear Bing Crosby, and that was on Monday nights. And he was the first of that crooning group. He set a style that was later followed by many singers, but that crooning style was very popular.
It's a voice you never get tired of hearing. It's some voices wear on you, but with Bing Crosby, the voice was smooth and easy, and it was a tone that you never tired of.
Skylark, have you anything to say to me? Won't you tell me where my love can be? Is there a meadow in the mist where someone's waiting to be kissed? Skylark.
Another famous member of the crooner group was Russ Columbo. And radio listeners loved the unmistakable smooth sounds of Perry Como.
And now we'll each go on our way. We had our lovely day. What's there to say, dear, now?
Your hostess, Kate Smith.
Crowned the First Lady of Radio, Kate Smith captured audiences with her warm heart and powerful voice.
That's the reason we bought the radio from my mother, my brother and I, because she loved Kate Smith.
How many hearts have you broken with those great big beautiful eyes? Those great big beautiful eyes that tell such beautiful lies.
The Kate Smith Show was a tremendously popular variety program that showcased talent like the Glenn Miller Orchestra. The songbird of the South won over audiences with her down-home style.
Baby, kiss me again.
Radio also introduced many listeners for the first time to classical music. Audiences loved the magic violin of Rubinoff, the orchestral performances led by conductors Andre Castellanos and Toscanini, and Bruno Walter with his outstanding New York Philharmonic.
Toscanini was always one of the greatest, I think, and Heifetz on the violin was great. And the beautiful voice of Marian Anderson, never heard this such since.
Let us break bread together on our knees. When I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me.
Throughout the war years, the sounds of American radio brightened many a serviceman's day. The music broadcast on our Armed Forces Radio Network brought a little bit of home to the lonely men and women stationed abroad.
Stand by, Americans. Stand by, servicemen of the United Nations. Here's Mail Call, selected by fighting men as one of the 3 top radio programs presented regularly by Armed Forces Radio. From 64 American expeditionary stations, 140 government-owned and foreign commercial stations, 118 overseas camp radio installations, and from dozens of powerful shortwave stations beamed all over the globe, transcriptions of this program reach every American overseas who can find time to lend an ear. And tonight, special greetings to you servicemen from the state of California. Ready to speed this sunny salute on its way is an adopted sweater girl of the Bear State. She's all wool and a sarong wide, Miss Dorothy Lamour.
I'm the secretary to the Sultan. He's a mighty potentate. He can't recall the names of all the girls he married, so he hired me to keep him straight. But when
programs for audiences here in the U.S. weren't only to sit back and listen to. Shows like the Lucky Strike Hit Parade invited listeners to take an active part and play along.
And on that program, they would play 10 top tunes. You sat and you listened every week to the top tunes, and you sent in your choice of what would be number one next week. And they surveyed all these music stores and all these kind of things. And if you were number one, you got a flat 50 of Lucky Strike cigarettes. Well, we had more cigarettes because I smoked Camels and she smoked Chesterfields, and we had all these Luckies. But we really enjoyed that. We listened to that program and said, do you think this is going to be first, or is that going to be first? And so there was, radio offered you a lot of things besides just sitting listening. It was kind of being involved too.
Kay Kaiser's College of Musical Knowledge offered the radio audience a unique mixture of music, comedy, and crazy questions. The quizmaster himself, Kay Kaiser, tried to stump contestants and always asked for help from his students, the studio audience. Spinning the weekly Wheel of Fortune became the trademark of Major Beau's Original Amateur Hour. The program offered the chance for unknown performers to break into show business. This showcase for the fame and fortune seeker became a national sensation. In 1937, Major Beau's introduced audiences to the Hoboken Four, a singing group that included a skinny little kid with bright blue eyes and a whole lot of talent.
I'm Frank, Major. We're looking for jobs. How about it? Everyone that's ever heard us liked us. We think we're pretty good. Well, shine and sway your bluesy. Shine, start with his shoesy.
Frank Sinatra would become one of the most popular performers of all time.
Why can't I let you know the song my heart would sing? That beautiful rhapsody of love and youth and spring. The music is sweet, the words are true, the song is you.
But the music on radio wasn't just for grown-ups.
But I suppose one of the most enchanting memories on radio for me was the singing lady who I think perhaps was out of Chicago. She had a beautiful singing voice, and she told stories of all kinds. And it was just magic. The stories she told, you could just see them.
I know what. I shall follow him. Wherever can he be going? Down a rabbit hole, of course. Well, it's big enough for me. I shall go down, too. Oh, I'm falling, or am I falling? I'm falling, not falling, or am I? Dear me, I'm surely not falling, for I easily see. There are cupboards and bookshelves, maps, pictures, and jam. Oh, I'm surely not falling, but, oh, yes, I am. Oh.
Puts her horse to sleep for 40 every night and wakes them up the same way in the early bright. They clap their hands and stamp their feet.
Radio brought music to everyone. There was something for each musical taste, from variety programs to classical concerts. Music captured the feeling that accompanied our changing world and kept time to the beat of a new era.
Here's a woogie woogie bugle boy company B.
The dramatic action-adventure programs had a tremendous radio audience. Listeners tuned in week after week to follow the lives of their favorite characters. and radio let us travel as far as the imagination could take us. It's no wonder radio was dubbed the theater of the mind. Programs like Gangbusters took audiences into the seedy side of gangster crime with what were called authentic police cases, always touting the message that crime doesn't pay.
He hunts the biggest of all game, public enemies that even the G-men cannot reach, the Green Hornet.
The ageless quest for justice was led by one of the great crime fighters, the Green Hornet. The Hornet and his valet, Cato, hunted down mobsters and villains each week to rescue America from the hands of evil. The Lone Ranger and his faithful companion, Tonto, championed law and order throughout the West. As the perfect hero, the Lone Ranger combined intelligence with the highest moral standards.
My brothers and sisters and I went to a one-room schoolhouse. We had to walk a mile both ways, and I can remember rushing home from school to hear the Lone Ranger, and can remember that Hi-Yo Silver so very well.
Hi-Yo Silver!
A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty Hi-Yo Silver, the Lone Ranger.
Children were easily some of radio's biggest fans. Programs like Let's Pretend and Chandu the Magician were enormously popular.
Our family always had a radio as far as I can remember, but it was always rather small, and it was on a desk in the next room to the dining room, and I sort of chuckled when people said that television was taking children away from the dining room table, because I took my supper in and sat it on the desk and listened to Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy, and Little Orphan Annie. And Little Orphan Annie was sponsored by Ovaltine, and if you saved the little disc from the top of the can of Ovaltine, you would send it in and get a decoder pin. And then every night they would give you code, and you would write it down and then twirl your little decoder pin around and decode that message, which was very important to the story that was going on.
If there was one form of entertainment that reached an all-time high during the golden days of radio, it was the mystery program. Audiences thrilled to the dangerous perils found in another, more hostile world.
When he sees us,
He's coming across the bridge.
heading for us.
What?
He knows we witnessed a murder. He's got to kill us, too.
Quick, stop the car.
Stay here before I can turn the car around.
Then what do we do?
First thing you know, you'd be scared to go out the door because it was your imagination working on you. You'd magnify what you were being listening to.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows.
The Shadow, alias Lamont Cranston, used his ability to cloud men's minds to solve cases that were too tough for the police. Each week, the Shadow matched wits against a host of terrifying evil villains.
That reminds me of another program which was on, I believe, on Monday nights, and it was called Sanctum. And it always began with the creaking door, and that was very scary.
Good evening, friends. This is your host of the Inner Sanctum. Welcome through the squeaking door.
And I can remember that particularly because two cousins, a boy and a girl, went with my sister and I. We worked out age right, and we would be, when our parents would go out, we'd be together. Well, Will and I would go into the front of the house, and they would be in the kitchen, and then we'd make all kinds of noises and, while this squeaking door is going on. And it registered pretty deeply.
That famous door became a trademark for the show's opening. It was one of a long list of sound effects that were instantly identifiable. Many programs had their own specialized effects, like Fibber McGee's Closet or the buzzing of the Green Hornet. Creating these complicated sounds was an art form in itself.
They had a closet that was as big as the room we're in, and they had every sort of thing you can think of to create whatever the sound had to be. Then they had large rolling wooden chests that had maybe 4 turntables on the top and huge speakers, and they could create the sound of an automobile wreck or glass breaking or whatever, and all of these things were available to them. And it was just a fascinating thing to observe, again, how a program was pulled together with all the talents of these skilled people. There was a small miniature door frame that would have a screen door on one side and a glass door on the other. And if the storyline was that somebody was walking up the pathway to the house and people were on the porch in the summertime and so-and-so was going to go in, the sound effects man at that point would open the screen door and let it slam. And, of course, the timing had to be just right. And it was absolutely a fascinating piece of business.
You know, that's a key point of the early radio. You really watched with your mind, because some of the sound effects just really directed you right into whatever they wanted you to hear or see.
One program used a variety of effects to set the mood for its long-running collection of horror stories.
Suspense.
Suspense used popular actors like Cary Grant, Humphrey Bogart, and Robert Montgomery to spin nighttime tales of doom. One classic episode starred Agnes Moorehead in Sorry, Wrong Number.
I'm sorry. What number were you calling?
Why, it was supposed to be Murray Hill 70093, but it wasn't. Some wires must have got crossed. I was cut into a wrong number, and I've just heard the most dreadful thing. Something about a murder. And, operator, you'll simply have to retrace that call at once.
I beg your pardon. May I help you?
Oh, I know it was the wrong number, and I had no business listening, but, oh, what's the use? Sake, I'm going out of my mind. Hello, stop ringing me, do you hear? Answer me, who is this? You realize you're driving me crazy? Who's calling me? What are you...
For those who love to puzzle over a good mystery, Sir Conan Doyle's ultimate crime solver, Sherlock Holmes, was the perfect remedy. Holmes, with his trusty assistant, Dr. Watson, solved masterful crimes in a way that always appeared most elementary. Radio saw the birth of a new type of program that is still going strong today, the soap opera. Shows like Mert and Marge, Our Gal Sunday, Ma Perkins, Just Plain Bill, and The Romance of Helen Trent revealed the day-to-day happenings of real people who had real-life problems.
There was another program that I suppose we listened to every Sunday night for as long as I can remember, and that was One Man's Family. And just coming down here, I remembered the man who started this family was Father Barber. And at the time, I wondered why this wonderful man would have children who could get into so many predicaments. Now I understand.
On Halloween night, 1938, the Mercury Theater broadcast a show that for many seemed just a little too real.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News.
It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard. Creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back in their pit and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of the firemen to recover the bodies and extinguish the fire.
Orson Welles' classic recreation of The War of the Worlds shocked listeners who tuned in not knowing they were listening to a dramatic program. For those who missed the show's opening announcement, the result was sheer panic.
Oh, he scared everybody. He came on just like it was happening, you see. And just like he was a newscaster. And he said they were invading and all of that. And people just went stark crazy.
It was so real that
everyone believed it. And because it was presented as a news broadcast, and everyone believed the news broadcast, just the same as they say today, well, it was on TV, so it must be so.
And people were getting their old guns loaded and their old muskets loaded and getting ready for war. They were. They really were.
As switchboards lit up at radio stations across the country, Orson Welles was left trying to explain what would become known as his famous Halloween spoof.
It came rather as a great surprise to us that a story, the fine H.G. Wells classic fantasy, the original for so many succeeding comic strips and adventure stories and novels, about a mythical invasion by monsters from the planet Mars, should have had so profound an effect upon radio listeners. Of course, we are deeply shocked and deeply regretful about the results of last night's broadcast.
One doesn't believe in the radio audience much. You don't know that whether they're listening or not. You have no idea how many people are listening or what they're thinking. I had every hope that the people would be excited as they would be at a melodrama. But
radio is new, and we are learning about the effect it has on people. Learned a terrible lesson.
The ultimate radio horror story became the most famous single radio program ever broadcast. The golden age of radio lasted for over 30 years. During that time, the Magic Box introduced us to many of history's greatest entertainers. The singers, the actors, the newsmen, and the comedians. Talented writers and staff created tales that were limited only by the size of your imagination.
It made you more imaginative. You had to create your own pictures if you were to enjoy it at all and get the impact of it. And they really had great people, I thought, to do these shows, just reading scripts and to make it believable.
We felt very close to those people in the programs, as though they were our friends. Not only that, but other people in radio were very important to us, like Will Rogers. I was thinking how when he was killed in an airplane accident with Wiley Post up in Alaska, I can remember going down the street with tears running down my eyes. I was just a little kid, but he was so real to us and so a part of our lives, that like a friend.
Well, I think if you will look at pictures of that period back in the late 20s, 30s, and 40s, you would see families gathered around a radio set. It might have been a table radio or a floor model radio, but this was what you did in the evenings at home. You would listen to the radio, and you could listen to programs 7 days, 7 nights a week, and there wasn't anything that you would hear that you shouldn't hear. It was just wonderful because the entire family could gather, and whether it was a radio drama or a musical program or an educational program, it was something that you either learned something from or it lifted your soul and your spirit.
It's been said radio helped you paint your own picture. And with each program, millions of people saw the same thing, just in a slightly different way. But that was the magic of radio.
So, without further ado, we bring you a very tiresome comedian.
That's tired.
Jack Benny!
Imagine if somebody dropped in and found us sitting around in the dark like a bunch of spook hunters.
Oh, Betty.
I'm sorry, Mother. I didn't mean it that way.
Listen. What's that?
Oh, it's weird, whatever it is.
No matter how we have treated our mother during the past year, that little bouquet of hyacinths or verbenias will square it, you know. Not only with mother, but with our conscience, too. When, as a matter of fact, you don't have to be squared with your mother. She knows you better than you know yourself.
NBC has been giving you, without interruption, every conceivable kind of coverage of this, as we newsmen believe it to be, the greatest news story in
the history of warfare.
A twisted ankle is nothing to monkey
But
with.
McGee, it isn't really any...
Come on, don't argue with old Dr. McGee now, precious. I didn't get a merit badge for first aid just for picking chiggers off the scoutmaster.
He's with me, and he's got a gun, and don't try to take it away from him because it's an old family heirloom, and he's fond of it.
Oh, yeah?
Now stop acting like something you've seen in the movies and put that cannon away.
Come in. Pardon me, I was looking for the washroom, but this will do.
Why, Fred!